happy holidays. Good morning, Sam. I think you're still on mute, by the way.
Good morning. I'm on mute. I'm
Hey,
not.
good to see you.
Good to see you too.
And you're in a wonderful forest.
Nature. Remind me of nature.
Is it that the family is not woken up yet?
The family is not woke up yet. I only have one in the family. That's it. My wife is with me. That's it. You know, the whole house. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember you will be in my house or not. No, I don't think so. Yeah.
I don't think so. I think I visit you at your office.
Yeah, next time I'll bring you to the house. Yeah.
Well, I'll be back in January. By the way, for January, I'm going to be again Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in California. But
Okay.
for the entire month of February, I'm going to be in India.
Nice.
Yeah. So there's Josh, there's Barry.
Hello, Josh. Hello, Barry.
Yeah.
Hello, that must be Sam. It is Sam.
Yeah.
Hi,
Looking
Sam.
forward
Sam.
to cities.
Hello, Sam squared.
You're going to get a double Sammy today.
A whammy Sammy.
Yeah, the
Like
Sam
I
is
said, I'm not going to prepare anything today. I'm not going to drive anything today. I'm inclined to just, I've been listening to music. I was listening to music a lot. In fact, well, I got to tell you, about a month ago, an early Christmas present to myself, I drove up to Vancouver and got a pair of Infinity Kappa 8 speakers. For 30 or 40 years, I've had Infinity Kappa 8s. This time I got Infinity Kappa 9s. And I put them here in my listening room, and I've just been just spending almost 50% of my quote unquote leisure time listening to music ever since. It's just cool, really good. I don't know if you guys know about Infinity speakers, but I just love them.
well. We'll have to do a A/B test to see which one you can tell the difference or the difference to make the difference.
So the 8s and the 9s, I definitely can. There's definitely the 8s are more efficient. They're actually louder than the 9s at the same volume level. But the
Okay.
9s have great clarity.
Yeah.
They're both extremely good speakers, extremely good speakers. Anyway, so I enjoy music these days in my quote unquote off hours time.
Yeah, talk about music. My favorite thing always that when I think of music is I think of how do you find the two notes that love each other? Once you find the two notes that love each other, now you got music.
Well, we can ask that in mathematical terms as well.
That's right. When they love each other, they use up the least amount of energy to listen because it's so easy to love it.
Ratio of small whole numbers.
Small whole number, love it.
Yeah, if you take the frequency, or I think the wavelength works either way. If the ratio can be reduced to the ratio of two small whole numbers, then they generally are considered compatible.
Hmm.
They don't clash.
That's the theory of tuning systems.
Yeah.
And thereby comes the Pythagorean comma. You know the Pythagorean comma?
Well, there's an issue that an octave cannot be divided down in equal parts that satisfy that small whole number ratio. You have to
That's exactly what you're talking about. An
Yeah,
octave is a 2-to-1 relationship.
right,
A fifth is a 3-to-2 relationship.
right.
A fourth is a 4-to-3 relationship.
Yeah.
But in music, a fifth and a fourth comprise an actual octave. But if you work out the math, it's not exactly correct. It's not exact.
Right.
So that leftover bit is called Pythagoras's comma.
Yeah. And so it sounds like it doesn't quite, it's not quite compatible in terms of the aesthetics of the audio.
But that's where you get variations in tuning systems.
Yeah, you have to.
Will adjust, how do you
Yeah.
do the major third, the minor third, the major second, the minor second, the half note, all of those. And that's why you got thousands of different tuning systems. In fact, here's how esoteric my younger brother was. My younger brother, Paul, who's born exactly 7 days to the day, younger than I am. He did his music theory thesis on ancient Indian tuning systems. I've never read his paper. Okay, all I know is that's the title of his master's thesis, and I've never bothered to read it, but I've talked to him about it.
Yeah.
So it gets very esoteric.
You were on yesterday when I mentioned Strawberry Fields, I think. Can't remember if you were.
I don't think so.
Oh, I was talking to Josh about it. I couldn't remember if you were attending, but when they recorded Strawberry Fields, they did something kind of related to tuning. If you look this up, and there's a very nice YouTube video on it, Strawberry Fields is not in a normal key. It's in a semi key. It's the first part of it is a half note off of the key it was recorded in, and the second half is approximately half a key off in the other direction. And they recorded them in a particular tempo, in a particular key, and then they adjusted the tape speed to get slight perturbations up and down from that, and then they spliced them together in the middle. Literally, physically spliced the tape, and they got a very unusual sound because Strawberry Fields is not in some standard key. It's in a half key up and a half key down, spliced together. And if you look up the YouTube video on Strawberry Fields in a weird key, semitone or whatever you call it, he explains the whole story and how Lennon really worked for a week trying to figure out how to make it sound the way he wanted it to.
Wow, amazing. I love listening to you guys talking. So I was not able to chunk it down to how do you mathematically figure out that when two notes are loving each other, right? Can you have an equation of that? Now I got more variable to work with now.
So let's see how you do it. What do you mean when two notes love each other?
Well, to me, first of all, it's depend on individual. You cannot say like, a Chinese music and an Indian music is two different music, right? So the Chinese might hear the two notes that love each other because a lot of environment. I mean, culturally, from the historical, they've been trained this way and all that stuff. So before I forget, the Chat GDP, I'm sure you heard about a lot of it nowadays with the open AI thing. Have you guys talked about it? Yeah, okay. So it's all cumulative, collective consciousness, collective music recognition, if you can think of it that way, right? So your culture depends on it. So for I hear the notes that love each other. The way I hear it, you may not be the same way that you hear it differently, right? So it all, as I say, so many perspectives. If you want to find the two notes that doesn't love each other, but if you find the right people, they might find the two notes that actually love each other. So, but when you listen to their background, their culture, then you beginning to love that two notes that love each other, also recognize it as such as well. So from my perspective, like I listen to the two pendulum that loves, two, and I call it the elbow pendulum with the elbow. So
yeah, the black keys all love each other. The pentatonic scale, if you play anything on the black keys, it sounds fine. It sounds a little, it sounds a little Asian, generally speaking, but you can play anything at random on the black keys, and it's the pentatonic scale is never classic.
So that's one law one law of our chaotic musical, whatever you call that matches that criteria, what I call it. Yeah. But for the baby that was just born, I guess because they have no preconception or whatever you want to call that, you might be able to love any key that you want to play anyway. So because as long as you play the key and you start clapping your hands, yay, you encourage him to love it. So like you could conditionally have a baby love any key you want. Does it make sense? I'm not sure. I don't know what I'm talking about.
If you look at lullabies, I'm pretty sure that lullabies generally follow a very simple mathematical pattern.
Mm.
And but adults generally find them dull and boring, uninteresting. They tend to be a little sing-songy and simple, but they're great for babies. So just look up, the theory of lullabies.
Mm. Love it. Yeah, that's a good place to start. Yeah. Never thought of it that way.
There's a very funny lullaby. It's sung not in English. It's sung in, I think, in Gaelic. And it's from a female vocalist, I think from Nova Scotia. And so she sings it in her language, so you don't know what the words mean, but it's a very soothing lullaby. And when you translate the lyrics into English to find out what she's singing about, it's all about how awful the baby's father is and what a terrible man he is.
Love it. Love it. Yeah.
But you
Yeah,
wouldn't know it. I mean, just listen to the lyrics in Gaelic or whatever the language was. They're just very soothing and wonderful sounding, with no appreciable meaning until you translate them.
So I'm basically extrapolating on what you were saying, Sam, because by note, I'm extrapolating to say not just a single note, but possibly an entire piece, right?
Yeah.
And when you're talking about entire pieces, entire works, whether they're 4 minutes long, whether they're an hour and a half, whatever, I'm kind of extending that notion of a note. And then when you say it depends on who's listening, one of the people who uses silence about as well as any other composer is Brahms. So Brahms will juxtapose sound with silence, particularly in surprising ways. John Cage, of course, is very famous for that. I think the extreme case. But
Yeah.
Brahms did an excellent job when he would actually build things and then all of a sudden nothing and then something else, So notes, I would include, just like zero in mathematics, I would include silence as part of the notes in the notation. And the last comment is, because of who it is who's listening, to me, music is about what it evokes in a person who's listening, which is why for me, I don't consider a lot of what passes for music to actually be music, because it's so emotionless. It's so intellectual, there's a bunch of intellectual stuff out there, which does nothing to me from my feelings and heart standpoint.
Elevator
We
music.
can get into discussions about what is music, what is just sound, what is noise, but to me, music is a very special part of that. That's just my opinion.
There's another very powerful idea in mathematics that gets a little complicated. If you take any section of music of any length, arbitrary length, and you slide it along to see how much it agrees with another piece of it, there's a mathematical function called the autocorrelation. How much is this piece similar sounding to that piece? And it turns out that music that people really like, is considered very musical, has a correlation function that obeys a law called the 1/f law. And this is one of the ways that they can take the unfinished symphony of a particular composer and finish it. They simply maintain that autocorrelation as they add the missing sections. And there was a great talk by a guy who did this, I think for his master's or PhD thesis. And he finished one of the famous unfinished symphonies, and he performed it in front of the audience and says, I dare you to figure out where the break is between the original and the continuation. And to the naive person, if you didn't already know the piece, you couldn't tell where it somehow changed authorship, because it still sounded like it was all part of the same piece. He kept the statistics in line. So that's another part of the mathematics. Go ahead, Sam.
So I don't know, you guys probably don't use Pandora anymore. It's kind of an old system.
I used to, yeah.
But yeah, the guy who founded it worked on this whole idea of musical DNA.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think it's actually DNA.
Really genres
of things that they cataloged.
Yeah.
And so you could actually get those degrees of similarity using those kinds of patterns.
Right.
What I would actually pose as an experiment today, since we have Chat GPT and OpenAI, etc., is if you guys recognize who Gustav Mahler is or Franz Schubert, they both have unfinished symphonies. Mahler had his unfinished 10th. And he was afraid to actually start his 10th because he was going to die in the course of composing it. He knew that because Brahms didn't get there, Beethoven didn't care, nobody else got to their 10th other than Haydn, okay? Haydn wrote like 100 symphonies. But every other major composer died during their 10th symphony. And sure enough, he died composing his 10th symphony. So his disciple, Derek Cook, decades later, with the permission of his wife, actually finished his 10th symphony. And it is a very good work. He clearly understood his master.
Yeah.
So an experiment I would propose is take that version, give the original partial symphony to ChatGPT or OpenAI, see how it would finish it, or 2 or 3 different ways it would finish it, and then do the A/B test, okay? Would you prefer to listen to this one or that one? And I suspect that there are still things that an actual human composer can put in, obviously, that a statistically based, generator cannot. Because in that is where creativity comes in.
Yeah, it's where you
And
depart.
an OpenAI generator, ChatGPT generator, arguably, I don't know where its heart is, So I don't know if it's actually just matching things or if actually generating something that's actually emotive.
Do you know about dice music?
No.
Mozart and who was the other composer? I forget the second. 2 of the composers actually played around with mathematical formulas for creating musical sounding sequences. And I think Mozart made a table. You roll the dice and you enter the table and that would give you a note. You roll the dice again, you go to the next line. And this turned out to be a very powerful technique for making what you would call elevator music. It sounds musical. It's not great, but it sounds musical. And it's all done by rolling the dice with these tables that Mozart might have been Brahms. I can't remember for sure who the second composer was, but they both played around with this. And it's in a book there were 2 guys at Bell Labs who were very much into music theory, and they wrote a book called Music from Mathematics. And they mentioned dice music. And I think they even included a CD in the book. And we're talking about a few decades ago, that you could actually listen to some of these examples of dice music. So if you look up dice music, you can find out this whole thing about.
Mozart was actually famous for these games. He has something I think called the upside down duet. We get 2 violinists with 1 sheet of music. They put it on a table between them, and the music is written in such a way that this person reads the music from top down, and this person reads the music top down on the same sheet of paper, exactly the same notation, just upside down, and it is a perfect duet. So he
Is that
actually
the one called Crab Cannon that Hofstadter talked about, or is that a different one like that? In Hofstadter's book,
Hofstadter did mention that
he's
particular.
got something called Crab Cannon, which either is that a particular piece or something comparable to it.
There are many such games.
Crabs go sideways. So
Rondos are
you're going sideways, and yeah. I mean, I read that book so many decades ago, I don't remember the details now. But yeah, it's in it. But he talks about that kind of thing.
Even Brahms, by the way, took certain initials of names, mapped those to notes, and used those as motifs in his music.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Would you call them master at work?
they're playing with sound, they're playing with composition, which is creativity, I think.
Yeah, they put their signature in by putting their initials in or something like it, bury their signature. Some artists do that too. They bury their signature in the painting instead of separately at the bottom.
Yeah. But see, here's where Mahler, if you take a look at his original orchestral manuscripts, he was writing in the columns all the time. He was writing notes to his wife, whom he loved dearly. If you take a look at a ChatGPT or an OpenAI composer, I doubt you would find those manuscripts with love notes in the columns and on the borders.
Fur Elise was written for a female, but that was not her name. It was his handwriting was so bad that they thought her name was Elise, but in fact, that some research eventually figured out who it really was and got her correct name.
Yeah, Beethoven was kind of an asshole at times.
Then the question is that can they write music without that signature?
Mahler
Well,
could not. No, he had to have everything driven from his emotions, his memory, his losses, his pains. That's what allowed him to compose music, from what I understand. Okay, he never got into this intellectual stuff of let me just put these two notes together and see what happens. It was all from pain and personal experience.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the basics from my perspective, is the basic of the needs to learn, because the pain is so great that I need to learn to get out of the pain, right? So music is a way of releasing the pain as well.
But for somebody else, I think they could. Bach, for example, could probably do that. Vivaldi could probably do that. Vivaldi had to compose a concerto every week. That's why he has so many.
He was a teacher, wasn't he? And he
He was a
composed
teacher at a girls' school. Okay, so this girls' school had an orchestra, and he had to have one or two compositions, maybe three, every week for the weekly concert.
There's a joke that he wrote the same concerto 27 times or something to that effect.
No. Some of these guys just transposed it for different instruments, but that's considered a different word.
But it's a joke because all his concertos all quote sound alike in some
Small variations.
Yeah.
In trivial ways, they do. I mean, just like all Baroque music sounds alike, all
Yeah.
romantic music sounds alike, all rock music sounds alike, all hip hop sounds alike. In those trivial ways, then yes, you could say that.
Could that be a signature as well? If you take all the music that he wrote, can you look at it from one perspective and say, yeah, that's a pattern right here. Here, there's a signature.
Yes, you can. It's easy because musicologists who study music can clearly identify these patterns and why they do the things they do and why other people don't do that. And even that, to the extent where their students have taken a certain pattern and then extended it slightly differently. So if you go from Johann Sebastian Bach to Johann Christian Bach to some of his other sons, you can see some influence very, very clearly.
There are a few people, not very many, who can take a phonograph record and simply look at the phonograph record and see sort of how rough the grooves are and say whether this is what kind of music it is and maybe who composed it and whether it's good quality or whatever. There are people
That
who
I
can actually
seriously doubt.
well, there's not very many people can do that, but there are a few.
Name somebody, Barry. I'd like to.
I'd have to go back and find when I read the story, and I might even have been a video. It was so long ago. I don't.
Now I'm a skeptic.
But well, there are people who claim to do that, and the story was they handed him not symphonic music, but like rock music or some popular music, and he says, "What the hell is that noise?" He could definitely tell that the popular music was not orchestral symphonic music. It was something very jarring to his visual acuity of looking at how rough the grooves of the record were.
Those are small.
I mean, you can tell a soft passage from a loud passage. Anybody can tell, whether it's a loud passage or a soft passage, because you can actually see the perturbations and how rough the grooves are. But he could actually work out at a finer level of detail more about the music just by looking at the surface of the phonograph record. I mean, after all, what does a laser do? They actually play really, really old, fragile records with a laser instead of a stylus. So scientifically, yes, you can get the information visually. And a laser does it so that they don't wear down antique records.
Yep, you can only play those a certain number of times.
Yeah, but you can play them arbitrarily with a laser. Because laser's not gonna wear them down. At least not for probably maybe many millions of plays. I guess enough times you can melt the plastic, but
There's somebody in your home now?
No, I got a refrigerator yesterday, not a brand new one, but a good used one. And so I'm kind of looking over there nervously if it makes strange noises. I just want to make sure it doesn't leak. I got rid of my old refrigerator because it had developed a leak and the freezer wasn't working well.
Yeah, you want to put a wet sensor underneath the refrigerator. It will sound
Good
a
idea.
lot when it does before you get to the carpet.
that's easy to do. Water is conductive of electricity, so you
Yeah.
can just put down something that absorbs water and will conduct electricity from one end of the pad to the other.
2 wire close enough, the water drum will get conduction.
Well,
I was
especially if you
curious,
put a
what are you guys planning today for the rest of the day, since it's called Christmas by many, otherwise it's just a holiday.
Do you celebrate? I'm gonna guess that you don't celebrate too many religious holidays, if any at all.
I don't. In fact, that's the standard, Chinese restaurateur
Right, okay.
annual appreciation, right? Thank you to
Right.
Jewish people. We don't know about your dietary restrictions, but thank you for always enjoying Chinese food on holidays like
Yeah,
Christmas.
I remember that. Yeah.
The difference is that, I don't know how I want to say this, because you are at a higher level of the society. So people, they have to work 364 days a year. Christmas is an important day because that's the day that they get off. and they have to work the next 3 months to pay off the gift that they just bought or something along that line. Yeah, so
That reminds me of a sex joke. Is it too dangerous to talk about a sex joke?
go for it.
There's a sex education class, okay, and there's a bunch of people. It's open to the public, and the person says, "Hey, sexuality is not to be normalized. You shouldn't, think badly of somebody because they do something different than you." And he says something, like frequency, for example. Some people do it multiple times a day. Some people do it multiple times a week. Some people do it as infrequently as once a year. And an old guy, 70 years old, in the back of the room says, "Yes, yes, yes, absolutely, that's true." And the teacher says, "Well, how come you're so enthusiastic about that?" He says, "Because tonight's the night."
Once in a lifetime, tonight's the night.
I think that's the cleanest sex joke I know. Anyway, so I'm gonna go listen to music. I'm gonna go eat something. I didn't want to prepare anything and launch into any deep conversation
Right.
today because I didn't want to stay the entire time. But next week, I definitely have some prepared notes that I would like to.
Wonderful.
So next week is New Year's Day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But New Year's Day, it's still more like
A lot of people are going to be watching football games or something like that, or there's always a parade and football games on New Year's Day.
Yeah.
So
Whatever works for you. I'm good. Yeah.
Is it the
I'm
Rose
eager to
Bowl?
talk to you about the video that I watched a couple of times and make some notes.
Is that Sabine Hofstadter's video?
Yeah, the good stuff, and then the chaotic, all that stuff.
Oh, you did watch that. Okay.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, I got it. I watched it right before we get on the Zoom. Yeah.
Don't worry, Sam. I watched about 3 minutes of it. I still have to finish it. So that's
I'm
I
good.
have been right. Now she went into much deeper and better presentation, but I've been writing about that basic stuff for 20 years.
Yeah, the funny thing is, before I watch something, I already have my own hallucination, how I would think about it. See, from my perspective, everything all go off from the same little pattern in the way the structure goes. Of course, you're gonna find a pattern in your chaotic. Are you kidding me? So depending on how you look at it, I just don't know how to get from point A to point B. So when she plotted out all the trade to get there, I'm saying, yeah, good. I'm good. I was there, but I don't know how to get there.
exercise left to the reader.
Yeah. I always appreciate this because it's, I always, I grew up in the Buddhist environment where I learned a lot of Buddhist teaching, all that stuff. So I kind of do things different than other people. And then once they prove that this is the right way to do things, I already got there. That's chaotic. It's the same way that it is kind of, and I really appreciate the hour-and-a-half lecture you have with Lexington group. It's wonderful. I learned so much from it. Yeah, it's
Oh, you
really.
watched that? Okay, good.
Yeah, I watched it twice. As I said, I printed out all the slides and make some notes myself before I forget and all that stuff. So learning for me is life and death. It's all the survival thing. It's I mean, because I'm the eldest son in an ex-sibling family, so learning, I pay so much attention to it that I pay every single detail. And like you say, I call that you have a way of saying I have a lot of concrete experience and a lot of abstract. That's what you have, and I could use a lot of abstract to help me to verify that if my concrete is actually working a lot. That's why I was able to. I guess I'm not sure how they call it. How they say stay in business after a year, how many percentage, and after second year, how many percentage. I'm on year 38. So I love the way that you present it in such a beautiful, systematic structure. doesn't get sidetracked. So it's like I could use more of it. And but I also at the same time, it's so many perspectives we look at it. For example, learning, if you have, like Gandhi say, be the example. So if you have a be example father figure, and the kids can learn it a lot faster than the one that doesn't have a father that be the example for them. So again, there's so many perspectives we can add to it, but then of course that mess up the whole structure of still be simple, and that's what the name Sam come in. Simple and manageable.
Sam, right? Yeah. Yeah, it helps if you practice what you preach, and if you spend more time practicing what you preach than preaching it, then you'll get more followers, because people learn by imitation. They don't learn very much by memorizing.
That's right.
Speech. So you do need to exemplify
That's right.
material, or else people won't think you're a hypocrite because you're not
Right.
practicing what you preach.
Yeah, the way I tell the parents to teach their kids is that, you know what, I can tell you how to do it, tell the kids how to do it. You have only communicate in such a way. There's what I call auditory. At the best case, you have visual. But if you be the example, you got 10 dimensions instead of just 2 dimensions, because everything goes with it. The vibration, everything all go with it. And then they can follow easier when you have a 10-dimension instruction versus a 2-dimension instruction. I tell you not to smoke,
Have you ever heard of a representation called Chernoff faces? A guy named Chernoff came up with this. It's a really great idea. If you take a cartoon face, you draw basically a simple oval for the head, which can be a round or oval. And then you have the eyes and the eyebrow and the nose and the mouth, and you can draw them with slightly different ways. And so each feature of a cartoon face can be one dimension. And it turns out that if you have a data set of about 30 some odd values, 10-dimensional values, and each one, you pick one of the parameters for, say, the left eye, one for the right eye, one for the eyebrow, one for the mouth. It turns out that if you have an array of all these Chernoff faces, you can quickly recognize ones that look alike and ones that look different, and ones which look so odd they must be mistakes, incorrect data. So if you look up Chernoff, Chernoff, I'll put it in the chat.
One more time, tell out.
I'm going to put it in the chat. So
Okay, good. That helps me a lot. Thank you.
but if you just look up Chernoff faces, and just find one or two nice little presentations of it, you'll see examples of these cartoon faces where you can have easily 10, 12 independent variables, all each one assigned to one feature of the face, the cartoon face. And it's remarkable how you can just look at a collection of these and see clusters that look alike and clusters that look very different, which in statistics, if you try to do it mathematically, it's like, you can't really appreciate what's going on. So
Disney do a good job on that, right? Disney do a good job in terms of presenting in their movies. And right now, the newer video is even more expressive you can present all the emotion into the 2-dimension thing.
Yeah.
And I was told some of the movie, they cannot do it because there's no way, for example, to present ghosts. How do you present ghosts in the 2-dimension,
Right.
Like,
But
because the feeling doesn't work very well.
There's something like 80 some odd muscles on the face. And although you don't articulate all of them, you can articulate, say, 3, 4, or 5 of them at the same time. And the ones that you articulate, the way you articulate them, give you these classical expressions: happy, sad, surprise, whatever. And there's a guy at Berkeley who actually worked out a symbolic way of doing this. It's called the facial action coding system, FACS. And he basically gave everyone a number. And so you say which ones are activated and how much on a scale 0 to 5 on each one. And then certain ones correspond to recognizable, faces: happy, sad, confused, surprised, angry. And by this facial action coding system, you can now have a computer animated cartoon faces that, you have the formulas for classical expressions.
So to me, it's almost like a translation, going from English to German, or going from facial muscle to the expression, the feeling of it. So, and if you get a third person to read the the whatever translated expression is, they can get the same feeling that you do, then you gotta.
Right, there you go. And the other, and it goes the other way too, with a ordinary webcam and analyzing the face, you can recognize, you know, which of the muscles are activated. So you can actually go from a video of a face or a snapshot of a face back to the nomenclature for facial action coding system and extract the facial expression. And the one muscle that's the most powerful one is called the zygomat. That's the one that you could smile. So the smile muscle is that's the most prominent one, the zygomat muscle. And then the others some of the others have names and the other ones just have these number assignments, but you know, like raising your eyebrows and, you know, and slanting your eyebrows and, you know.
The staring.
So look up facial action coding system. I'm trying to remember the name of the guy at Berkeley. I always have trouble remembering his name, but
Yeah.
he's pretty well known for this work. And if you're in that discipline, go ahead, Sam.
Isn't there a TV show called Lie to Me that was all based on these micro expressions?
Yeah, he actually was a consultant on several TV shows where they wanted to emphasize as facial expressions is really part of the content of the story. And I think you're right. I think Lie to Me may have been one of them that he consulted on, but I'm sure it was more than one.
No, it clearly did a good job. You know, from a face, it would just do these sub-second transformations of, you know, these angles and lines connecting various features and just immediately just blip over that. But you could tell that somebody did a lot of work to come up with that.
This guy spent his
shot
whole
or
professional, well, I
shot.
think he spent, you know, several decades working at this facial action coding system. So you could have a language for
Right.
all
Yeah,
these.
that's why you can tell when somebody's like faking a smile,
Yeah.
certain things are not happening with their eyes and it's just happening around the mouth, or, you know,
Right.
those are very easy ways to tell.
There's a French guy who gave a name to either a genuine smile or a fake smile. I'm trying to remember the name now, but there's a certain kind of smile that distinguishes a genuine smile from an artificial one, a fake smile. And that's one of the first observations about, you know, recognizing Duchenne. That's it. Look up Duchenne smile. Duchenne is a French surname. I don't know the exact spelling, Duchenne or something like that. But look up Duchenne smile. The Duchenne smile is the genuine smile, as opposed to a forced smile, where you're not really amused, but you're just pretending to be.
Well, there's so many smiles. There's a scary smile, there's a fierce smile, and there was a threatened smile. There's one that smile that you already pee on your pants, that kind of smile.
And some people get very, very good at recognizing subtle differences. The average person is sort of mediocre, but there are people who specialize in reading faces. And
Right.
like fortune tellers, for example,
Oh yeah.
what they do is they kind of meander around in their predictive space, being very vague, and they're looking
Right.
for very slight micro expressions
Yeah.
that are positive or negative,
Yeah.
and they try to drive the narrative towards the positive reaction on the face. And that's, by the way, why they use a crystal ball.
Yeah.
Because if you're looking at the guy's face, they can tell you're staring at him. But if
Yeah.
you're looking at the reflection in the crystal ball, because a sphere makes a perfect reflection, right? So they're looking at the crystal ball, but it's really a mirror. The crystal ball is really, so it's how they can look at the person's face and study without appearing to be staring at them.
Yeah. That's
And
right.
magnify certain places
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So if you move around, you get this magnification.
Yeah.
The fortune tellers use a crystal ball. It's a
Their
trick.
livelihood depend on it. They need all the tools they can get.
Yeah. But yeah, sometime if you ever see a crystal ball that fortune tellers use, you'll see it's really a mirror.
Yeah, that's a different perspective also. That you can, for example, I'm looking at you, right? I'm talking to you at the same time. So I'm talking to you, like I'm looking away another place. So like I'm talking to you too. You know, can you tell the difference, how you feel differently? So that's an interaction part of the expression as well that you don't see because you cannot capture it in 2 dimension.
And the thing that you can't tell on these Zoom screens, if you're really close to somebody, you can tell if their eyes are glazing over.
Yeah,
Look at what is Sam doing. His eyes, yeah, he's in a state of
yeah.
torpor. I don't know, but yeah, I
You
work
look up as well as look down and looks to the
Yeah.
sideway and yeah.
Yeah, look in somebody's eyes and see if their eyes are glazing over. But you can also sort of tell people are lying if you look into my eyes when you say that, son. You know, and some parents get pretty good at recognizing these
Right.
nuances in their children's expressions when they're being disingenuous and
Right.
trying to pull a fast one.
So collecting facial expression from the son as you try to teach something is a part of the learning as well.
Yeah, so, I mean, they don't. I mean, in some cultures, it's considered impolite to look at somebody to
Yep.
stare at them.
Chinese.
And in other cultures, it says, look at me when I'm talking to you. So
That's
you
right.
get these different cultures where you're supposed to, not look a superior in the face. And
Yep.
but these are cultural differences. But yeah, nowadays with the the webcams and all that kind of stuff, you can actually get recordings and you can go back and study facial expressions in a video and see a lot of detail that you miss in real time.
Yeah, I mean, in the old days Chinese culture, where if you look at the emperor, they're walking by or whatever, you got your head chop off.
I mean, when the royals are in a parade, and people on a float are supposed to wave at the crowd, the
Yeah.
royals wave this way. They don't wave this way. They wave this. They're taught the way that a royal wave is this way.
I wonder why.
It's British, and I don't really know, except I think this is sort of like a hick, and this is sophisticated. This is refined. So,
It's reserved for them.
yeah, so that's sort of very immature, and this is very sedate and royal and regal. So you're
Cover all the
acknowledging
ground.
people, but
Right, that's beautiful.
peace be with you, my child. Yeah, hand gestures. So,
That's another part of learning that I found very interesting. I call it pace and lead.
Pace and Lee.
I have to pace you before I can lead you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I got you.
Pace and lead. Yeah. So
Pace and Lee. Yeah.
So for example, let's say my son is being rebellious. I can try to stop him by forcing him. Are you going to be more rebellious? Fight back. But if I'm rebellious with him and sitting right next to him, shoulder to shoulder, like, okay, how dare the software is written this way, how dare again? If you're in the rebellious mode with him, then, and as you have enough pacing, I call it, then you can lead him a lot easier than you try to suppress him and all that stuff. So that's another part of the learning that, again, it can go so many different ways. I say so many perspectives, and that's one of the to me, because I'm go for it.
Finish first.
Yeah. So because I'm the eldest of the family, and as well as I'm sort of caretaker role in many places, I help a lot of people in that way. So I found that most effective is to pace and lead to get them when they're sad, even though they just broke the wine bottle they're supposed not to drink or whatever, it doesn't matter. You go sit with them, and otherwise, you won't listen to you. So pace and lead is very, to my perspective, is one of the very key part of the component of, I call it effective learning experience or whatever you call that. Yeah.
You got to stay in sync with the rate at which people learn. Go ahead, Sam. You had your hand.
I recognize that as conversational or verbal Tai Chi. In
Yeah.
other words, it's not directness, but it's taking someone's movement and then moving with them. But as you move with them, it's easier to impact or influence their glide path, the circle, rather than immediate, confrontation and trying to obstruct it that way. So that's the whole idea of 4 ounces of force versus 250 pounds going this way. Okay.
Yeah.
I recognize that as verbal or conversational Tai Chi.
Imagine that you were dancing with somebody on a dance floor, but the dance floor has holes in it, except that it's a weird dance floor because the holes that I would fall through are not in the same places as the holes that my partner would fall through. So as we're dancing around, when we get near one of my partner's holes, the partner's going to push away from it, and vice versa. And if you use this sort of this visual metaphor that don't go there, I don't want to go there, you know, the strength of the pushback goes with how close you're getting to one of their dreadful holes. And all these holes are their dreads. So that's a kind of a nice visual metaphor in a Tai Chi dancing is, can you recognize if you're driving towards a topic that the other person is uncomfortable with, and then you dance away from that so that you don't end up with this conflict instead of a dance.
Mhm.
So I have this
Yeah.
notion that
Nice.
the fears can be mapped to these, you know, these holes in the dance floor, but they're idiosyncratic to the individual. And when you get a drama, it's where I want to go where you don't want to go, and vice versa. So then you get a very chaotic dance because
So the only way I can get you to go to where where I need to go, I don't want to go, is that I need to really having a lot of fun. It's totally immersed with your dancing, and then unconsciously got there or something like that.
yeah. Well, imagine, suppose that for you there's a hole right there.
Right.
Well, if your partner goes there, but literally picks you up and goes across the hole because that's not a hole for them,
Mhm.
then you have a very interesting dance where you each carry the other over their dreadful places.
Mm.
And so you let people have their own dance on their own power, except where they're in dread, and then you carry them.
Mm.
And that's a nice metaphor too, for especially working with children. So you give them a lift when they have anxiety.
Right. I was watching one of the video that you have about psychosis and all that stuff. So it's like, the way I call it, how do you tell a person that's drunk that he's drunk, or how the person say that he's stupid, or whatever that along that same line.
Right.
So how do you, the biggest challenge I have almost constantly, and I have no way to crack that yet, is dealing with rebellious kid or rebellious adult. That's the one that's really difficult.
Classical solution is you make up an allegory. You make up a story with characters that are just invented characters, and you don't point out that one of the characters is the mirror image, you know, of your son.
Right.
So that's the real power of allegories and parables and fables, is that you tell the same story but with invented fictive characters.
Right.
And if you do that right, you can bring up a topic that you couldn't bring up directly.
Got it.
And so that's sort of the impetus for the creative arts, the fables, the allegories, the parables, and comedy sketches and all that kind of stuff. That's it's a true story, but substituting imaginary characters. Very powerful teaching tool.
Yeah, I do that with my 5-year-old, 8-year-old grandson.
Yeah. And eventually they catch on and they realize that you're just, you know, it's a trope, and they realize that this isn't a made-up story. This is really about me, isn't it?
Right. So the way I do it is with my kids is even though my kids are, have grandchildren now. So anyway, so the way I have it is I will have the story started, and then I would let them finish up my sentences.
Yeah.
And then they'll fill in. So when they finish up my sentences, now I know what's inside the black box, which way are they going, so I can gently, have the story go the other direction that I want to go, or have more clarification for them. I can't turn on the spotlight.
Yeah. So our culture is full of narratives, and narratives might seem very much like flights of fancy and totally made up, but in fact, they're mappings from reality to a space that's a safer way to broach an otherwise delicate topic or emotionally wrenching topic.
Right. So I prefer that storytelling versus the fairy tales, Disney character, so happily ever after story. I'd rather have that constructed. So the funny thing is, when my kids are in high school, the teacher was asking them, where did they hear the story? And they come back and ask me, or my son and my daughter asking, Daddy, where did you got the story? My teacher want to know about it. I smile, and my daughter picked it up, and I was like,
Yeah. Well, I made it up. You made it up. What prompted you to make it up? Well, let me tell you. I was making an observation about our local culture here, right in the, our family culture, and that inspired a story.
yeah.
At some point, they have enough maturity, enough emotional maturity, and then personal integrity to appreciate that that's a teaching technique.
I call it like a sneaky way to educate them without
Right.
really educating them. So because they can live in the story, it's like that's
Right.
normal. Yeah.
Yeah. So they can actually create the model that represents themselves as a storybook character. Yeah. I wish I was better at that. I really thought about that very late in life and never had much practice doing that. I was always writing mathematical, scientific nonfiction, and almost never wrote flights of fancy. I wrote a few, and so in terms of my writing, they take a lot of work. You really have to sit down and construct them, because it's not something that just comes naturally, at least not to me. For other people, they're very good at just generating stories, synthetic stories without a whole lot of effort, but not me. I really have to work at it.
So what happened to me is this: when in my middle school, I go to a small town, middle school that have a library of probably about 10,000 fairy tales book on the bookshelf. And I thought that unless I finish all the books, I cannot finish my school or something along those lines. So I will read 10 fairy tale story book a day. I can just skim through them, and people challenge me that you didn't read that. I can have them pull a book. I can tell you which page and what expression on it or something like that. So I have a lot of, I would say, cumulative knowledge on fairy tales. So I have that one training. The other way that allow me to do this is because I don't look at a lot of theories. I just look at the situation here. I call it, you throw a bone, the dog doesn't run away. The dog runs straight to the destination where the bone is. So I like, okay, this is a situation. I have a situation I need to deal with. I figure out what my kids is thinking and correct it, whatever. So it's like, what's the fastest way for me to go that? Okay, storytelling. Okay.
Absolutely. And if you're really good at it, you can be a very effective teacher.
Yeah, it helps a lot. It really helps a lot. Yeah.
So where do you think Release the Kraken came from? Probably somebody who was a duck farmer.
Yeah.
So,
and my focus is always about responsibility. So like my daughter, when she was 12 years old, she come to me and, Daddy, can I go to the prom? I say, no, I'm not going to make the decision. You're going to make the decision. I give you all the facts, and you can check the facts on the internet. So to say Daddy didn't lie to you. And then, she got all the research and I tell her about the psychology of boys and all that stuff. And then a month later say, Daddy, I'm not going to the prom.
Yeah.
Because I value my friendship right now more than my prom that will mess me up. Like, okay, take responsibility. So that's how I deal with the kids. The other one that I also, for example, I'm teaching my kids how to drive, right? So I've noticed that attention is really the key factor of a good driver versus a not driver. You know your limitation of how much attention can you handle. So this is what I do. I say, you take as many driving lessons as you want. I don't care if you take 100 driving lessons with this instructor, but the final class I would go with you on a Sunday. We go drive in around our neighborhood. I'm going to introduce one distraction at a time until we got about 10 distractions. And I want to see how many distractions can you handle without whatever. So we drive around the neighborhood, the same route. First time is no talking, window up, no music, no phone, and around one time we get practice. The second one, I just roll my side of the window down and so on and so forth. The next one, music. By the time we got loud music going on, we're talking to mom and speakerphone and all that stuff. So one day, of course, Daddy, can I drive to the school today? I say, well, what are variations? So he counted like a 5 distraction. He's in a hurry, the traffic, morning traffic and all that stuff. I was like, oh, it's more than I can handle. I was like, can you drive me, please?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how I approach learning. How do I teach my kids?
Right.
Versus all that.
The rougher the seas, the more difficult it is to steer the boat.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So I love it when I listen to your lecture and you are funny. You are giving. And I love the Martian perspective, and it's really nice. And really, it's a a different perspective. I learned. Yeah.
Yeah. I because I gave that talk enough times, I really did work on the introductory pattern a little bit about giving the audience a chance to kind of settle down before I got into the meat, because the meat is deep. The meat of that talk is very deep.
Yeah.
You
You
can't
have
just
so
pop in
much.
there. I had to sort of ease into it. So I wrote that little parable of the girl in the garden talking to God, and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
story about I'm really an anthropologist from Mars,
Yeah.
which I stole from Oliver Sacks. I stole that
Yeah.
trope from Oliver Sacks. But
Yeah.
try to put my audience in a receptive mood.
Yeah, it's called fun, and then I call it chunk it down. You chunk it down to a small biteable size that they can bite it.
There's a lot of material. I mean, that's probably a semester's worth of material if you really go into it.
Yeah, I look at that as a textbook for learning.
Yeah, but I wrote it, at the level of an encyclopedia article. Encyclopedia articles are pretty dense,
Right,
and so you typically would read them more than once.
right.
But that audience managed to stay tuned in for 90 minutes, which is not an easy thing to do. But that's a particularly special group. It's the old Boston Computer Society alumni that they're all graduate level scientists, mathematicians, technology people. So
Yeah,
the average general audience, that would not have worked.
yeah.
But I think there were only maybe a dozen people in that call.
I can see that you put a lot of work into this. I can see all that years of
30 years, 35. I actually began thinking about this in 1985.
Yeah,
So that article is sort of the digested summary of something like 30, almost 40 years now, but more than 35 years of work. Although most of it was concentrated between 85 and 2005.
Mhm.
There's some material that I added in the last 15 years, but most of it was already in place in the early
Right.
2000s.
I mean, at one time I was thinking about how do you do a theoretical, philosophy, of theoretical psychologies, and this one could be a theoretical learning. How could you make an equation out of it so that you can solve some learning difficulties and all that stuff? So that's one step closer to what I was thinking about.
There are some other short blog posts, like there's one of my blog posts is called Solving for the Backstory. It's really analogy. It's really emotional algebra, because if you take that storybook character model, fears, emotions, backstory issues, beliefs, desires, intention, and the part of the character that you know the least about is their backstory.
That's right.
If you know the backstory, that really gives you a lot of insight into what their issues are and some of their behavior patterns are. And so it's a little like solving for the unknown in an algebraic equation, except that the unknown is this whole backstory, and you get little bits and pieces of it that leak out if you know somebody over a period of time. But you're really solving for a bunch of unknowns that are all in some kind of an algebraic relationship.
Right.
So there's so you can borrow ideas from algebra, from calculus, from Maxwell's equations. You can borrow these mathematical concepts from lots of sources, and they just give you tools for thought that sort of fit into the way I do my thinking. Most people don't think with quite the same amount of mathematics that I use.
Yeah, that I recognize my part of it, that I tend to do that. I'm taking two unrelated topic and relate together. Like I say, it's like throwing the bone away and the dog will run straight to it. Like, how could I solve the problem with these two unknowns or whatever that I'm trying to tie together? And
reasoning by analogy. So, one of my strengths is constructing analogies that are realistic. That there's enough similarity that the analogy works. That you can think about it in this domain, and then map it over to that domain, and the structure holds. A lot of analogies fall apart because there's not a one-to-one mapping.
Yep.
And to the extent that you've got a good one-to-one mapping, that every element in one domain maps to its mate in the other, then you can reason in the two domains. And
That's right. Yeah. And it helps if you read encyclopedia when you grow up also. Because
I read the encyclopedia, mostly the A book, because back in those days, they used to give away, the A
book.
book, and then you would have to buy B through Z. And so my grandfather had one complete encyclopedia, but he had a whole bunch of A books from different different salesmen that left them. And he did eventually pick one to buy, but
Britannica, right? Yeah.
yeah. I mean, right behind me, I've got the World Book Encyclopedia, and you can't see it from this angle.
Right. Exactly. Right.
It's,
Yeah. They talk about that. I look at it also, like you say, the backstory. I think like I classify that as outside the bandwidth of the people, right? So if you can only handle 3 variables at the same time, and you can juggle only 2. Some people only juggle 2 balls, and some people can juggle 3 at the max.
right.
And once it's outside the bandwidth, then when you take care of the 4th one, the first one drop, like that. So that's not a must. I wouldn't. Yeah, backstory is a good term. For me, it's like it's outside my bandwidth. Is what I call it. Outside the bandwidth of whoever is dealing with the situation.
Yeah, habitual practices, idiosyncratic practices, those are sort of the most obvious ones that you can observe. And then you say, can you eke out the beliefs that would make sense for their practices? Because practices make sense if they correspond to your beliefs. And so you can kind of work your way, deeper into the psychology. But that's what a shrink does. Like psychologists will sort of work their way over a period of many, many sessions and eventually get the whole picture. And then they can find out what are the burning issues and what were the traumas in their backstory that they never really healed from. And
Right.
the average person, you have no clue. I mean, you get very little information.
Right. But if they believe in it, and if they're already practicing it, they only need to use half the dosage of the bandwidth for that one variable, whatever they call that. So it's much easier.
What I find really interesting is strong beliefs, what I call sacred beliefs, which are free-floating beliefs. They're not grounded, and the misconceptions. So people harbor all kinds of misconceptions, and entire cultures harbor misconceptions. You have schools of thought which are just baloney, but they persist, sometimes for centuries. And any individual or tribe or a culture that is laboring under a misconception is eventually going to have some kind of conflict, they're going to hit a brick wall eventually with their erroneous belief. And a lot of theology talks about, having an awakening or an epiphany or something where you suddenly change a deeply held belief and switch to another perspective. And but not just, science does the same thing. You have those breakthroughs in science where you overthrow the old model, supplant it with a new model. So whether it's a belief, a theory in science or mathematics or engineering or sociology or theology, the same phenomenon occurs in all these different disciplines.
It's the same thing that you're talking about, the smiley face and the slouching face that's going through the 3 cycle of the learning and unlearning and all that stuff. So it's the same concept. Whether it's a collective learning or the individual learning, you have to go through the same cycle.
Yeah. You look at public figures like Trump and Putin and other world leaders, and you think, where are they in these, these very, very profound learning curves? Are they going to, they've been riding on this false belief system and getting away with it for so many decades.
Right.
At some point, they're going to, the higher they rise, the harder they fall.
That's right.
Trope. And so people are sort of waiting for the fall of the high and mighty.
That's right.
And you can prophets used to do that in biblical times, and today it's not prophets; they're political analysts, secular political analysts, but they're doing the same thing. They're trying to figure out where somebody is, in where they're laboring under misconceptions. Eventually, going to smack them down. Yeah,
also because they are driven by the egoistic thing, and they have been for the past success or the illusion of the
Right.
past success,
Yeah.
even though the success may not be true at all. And
Right.
that driven them for the pride and the ego and
Pretending that you've won by a landslide when in fact you got roundly beaten. I mean, talk about a misconception, a delusion.
yeah,
And some of these delusions, you're looking at, how can anybody be that deluded? I mean, it
Yeah.
just, I mean, how can they ignore, the publicly observable evidence? But there you have it. You've got Trump, you've got Putin, you got
right.
the leader in North Korea and these South American leaders. You
Right.
see there, you go, my goodness. I mean, we are a species that are just rich, thick in misconceptions.
Right. But I label that as habitual. You know how we have habitual momentum? You
Yeah.
continue to do whatever you're doing.
Inertia.
Habitual belief, habitual egoistic, habitual because the
you get
habit is
inertia.
push you so far that the first law of momentum got you there.
So, but one of the things that's going to be interesting with the AIs that are emerging in the 21st century is whether AIs can actually literally do the mathematics, because those models are fundamentally mathematical, even though they may be, the metrics may be a little loose in terms of putting, 3 decimal place. You wouldn't put 3 decimal places on a lot of these
Right.
numbers that kind of loosey goosey, but I can see that, the AIs might rely on those kinds of models to make stories that sort of hang together mathematically.
Yeah.
But they're not mutually inconsistent.
Right. So the way I think about AI, I'm so glad you brought it out, is you think of it like every wisdom, every knowledge, every learning is almost like having a specialized tool to solve a certain problem that it was too complicated to solve by itself. So you have this, let's say, for example, isolectic triangle formula, whatever, A squared, B squared, C squared kind of thing. So it's like, think of it like a Home Depot. You have all the tools in the world under one roof, right? The biggest problem of what I found there is that when the time for you to use a tool, you're not using it. For example, using a 4x2x4 to hammer the nail instead of using the right hammer to do it. So for me, it's always how do you know when's the right time to use which tool out of the whole, Home Depot's inventory that you have, right? That's AI. I think have the problem. It's like, how do you, in the split of a second, define the right tool, the right concept, the right formula, the right whatever learning that you've been trained to do. And that's why the training for preparing to deal with a disaster is really important. It's like, what to do exactly at the time, because you're prepared for this, for the few event that can happen, like practicing what we call that fire drill.
Yeah. I don't know. Did you ever watch the Disney movie? I think it was a Disney movie, The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
At the very end of The Wizard of Oz, where the wizard is behind the curtain, and he's sort of exposed as a fake, but he gives a gift to each of the 3 characters: Dorothy, the Scarecrow, and the Tin Man. And to the Tin Man, he gives him a diploma. And when he gives them the diploma, the Scarecrow brightens up and he recites what you think is the Pythagorean theorem. Have you ever actually listened to what he recites? It's not the Pythagorean theorem. It is a tortured rendition of it. The sum of the square root of the sides of an isosceles triangle is equal to the square root of the remaining side. He's got every single word in it is wrong, but the meter sounds like the Pythagorean theorem, and he's got square roots instead of squares, and he's got an isosceles triangle, not a right triangle. And when you as a child and you hear that scene, you have no idea that what the Tin Man is reciting is totally baloney.
Mm.
But if you look it up on the web, you can actually find the clip, and you actually see the actual text that he recites. And so he has a diploma, which makes it sound like he knows what he's talking about, and yet he recites total gibberish, total
right.
baloney. And it's a very cute little piece in the writing,
Right.
where they put that in there. And I didn't know about that, I think, until maybe 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, this is something I read actually last week on the Facebook. One of the things we talk about is that you know, the way it goes is something like, we tend to believe that people speak in confidence.
Yeah, they sound like he makes it sound like he knows exactly what he's doing,
That's right.
and
Yeah,
it's total baloney.
right. And
And no,
instead of believe that whatever people telling the truth or know what they're talking about. So
and not only do the characters in the story buy it, the whole audience in the movie theater. Yeah, how many people in the movie theater realize that what the scarecrow says is garbage?
yeah, reminds me of the Nigerian prince email that about
Right. Yeah.
only the stupidest of stupids will actually do whatever they're suggesting to do. Like, I got you there, you know, like that. We give you many chances to get out of it, you know.
So it's really you have to be very, very keen. It's almost like the Sherlock Holmes character who notices details that
Yeah.
don't add up,
That's
details that belie
Yeah,
the superficial perspective.
right.
And I'll tell you, it's hard work to pick out details that overthrow the superficial appearance of things.
It's hard work for the general public. It's hard work for people that doesn't know math. It's easy for you and me for many things that we are familiar with. For example, I got many friends that come to me and say, Sam, you pay me $500 and you know the pyramid scheme and you get $1,000 back the next day, that kind of thing. I mean, come on.
Yeah,
It doesn't take
Ponzi scheme. You have to say, well, there's this whole mathematical structure called a Ponzi scheme. Have you ever read the story of the Ponzi scheme? And then you show that it's, and so yeah, people can delude themselves, or they can be charlatans who delude. They know that they're deluding the public. The snake.
Yeah, they're coming from so somebody that's, for example, Trump, he think he's rich, right? So whatever he speak, people buy it. So whatever he say, people go do it. Donations of $500. I said it's per month. It's not just a one-time deal or something along that line.
Yeah, it's a trap. It's a trap.
Yeah. And it's so interesting. Like I say, for you and me, we see right through the detail is there, because you got all the things that tells
once you see through it, because at first you don't see through it. There's a point where you think there's something fishy going on here, and then you do the research to study it, and then you figure out the flaw. And once you see the flaw, you see that it's bogus, then then there's no doubt. But communicating that observation is really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard to tell the truth and have people see that you've exposed the bogosity,
That's right.
the falsehood. It is hard to overthrow. I mean, in science, when and a new theory comes along and it does overthrow the old theory. Here's a classic example. There was this theory of combustion called the phlogiston theory. Phlogiston was this imaginary substance that was in the fuel, and that when you burned the fuel, this phlogiston was converted into heat. And two people, so Joseph Priestley and Antoine Lavoisier were the first two scientists to try to take a look at this more carefully. And Lavoisier said, I want to measure the mass of the phlogiston. So he measured the mass of the fuel, then he measured the mass of the ash and the gases. And the mass of the ash and the gases was more than the mass of the fuel, which meant that the phlogiston, if it existed, had a negative mass. And in the process, they both discovered oxygen. That what is happening is oxygen is combining with the fuel and therefore adding mass. So the phlogiston was represented the absence of oxygen. And when you put the oxygen in to get combustion, then the phlogiston, vanished because it was the gap, it was the hole. Right. Lavoisier and Priestley both got credit for discovering oxygen, but Lavoisier had the correct model of combustion, and Priestley believed in the phlogiston theory to his dying day. Even though he got credit for discovering oxygen, he never let go of the phlogiston theory. And that you look and go, how can he be in cahoots with Lavoisier discovering oxygen and still cling to the incorrect theory that the oxidation theory overthrows. He never lets go of the wrong theory. And those not the only example, but that's sort of one of the most head-shaking examples of a prominent scientist simply not realizing that the theory that he was working with was disproven, was falsified by the experimental results, which involved the discovery of this invisible substance called that got to be.
I'm more interested in like, how do I prevent myself from doing that? How do you prevent yourself from doing that, Barry?
You really have to be disciplined about the evidence. I just want to see if that's my brother calling it. I think it is.
Go for it.
Nope, that's not my brother's phone number.
I'm going to take a quick bio break, Ruth. Give me 30 seconds.
Okay.
I'm actually here copying yesterday's video, Barry.
Say again.
I'm actually here chopping yesterday's video to remove that dead space. You know, a couple weeks ago, I went off to go have brunch with my daughter.
Right.
And the video, I think, went on for like 7 or 8 hours.
Holy shit.
Too long to load into my video editor, even though I got 64.
But you could chop it with, what was that? Split command or whatever. Split command.
Yeah, I haven't tried doing that yet. Like I said, I have misgivings about whether it understands format. So
you know, it doesn't need to. You can split by time. So if you know that it's 2.5 hours, you can say split with a 2.5 hour.
I'll try it.
Limit, and it'll chop it in the middle of the protocol, but you don't care because you're gonna actually edit out, you know, the tail of it anyway. So you do it. You hack the tail off, and then you cleanly edit the exit.
Like I said, I'm not fully engaged today. I'm just going to be listening for you guys, guys.
So,
and Sam, you and I'll try and visit you sometime in January when I come back down.
Sure, love it. Thank you.
Where are you located, Sam?
Silicon Valley. I'm about literally 5 minutes from the Apple spaceship headquarters.
Yeah. Are you employed in one of the Silicon Valley big shot companies? No,
Yeah, I was working for AMD for 7 years as a quality assurance and the reliability engineer for that, and then I joined a separate company, militarized some products. So,
are you retired?
No, I'm too afraid to retire. I want to keep myself busy.
Right,
See,
so
from my perspective, again, I want to equip myself in the concrete environment where I have a lab. I can test out my own theory of whatever I want to do.
Yeah,
that's really important to me because, you know, like you say, there's too many abstract out there, and I really, from my perspective, is always put my feet on the ground and figure out what works, what doesn't work. So I'm running the same business, IT wholesale business, and
okay. So you're in the IT industry, but independent entrepreneur.
Think of it that I'm a small business with less than 20 employees, with less than $20 million in revenue per year, and I love to have that, whatever call that, lifestyle business. Some people call that lifestyle business. Yeah. And my wife working as a CFO, and I'm in the office whenever I want to, and all that stuff. So
cool.
Yeah. So the way that my view is, every day I'm making sure that I have revenue, I got profit. I deal with regulations. I see resellers, customers, and multiple levels. And for me, IT is like a survival tool for businesses, and it's a heartbeat of the whole society, how it works, and all that stuff. So I love that view of what works, what doesn't work. So when the customer call me up and say a few words, I already know if this customer is going to be a trouble or good or easy or profitable or not profitable, or how long they will last, and all that stuff. So I can summarize all that in the little conversation, and I love that.
I'm probably the worst possible customer for an IT company because I keep really, really old gear running forever. I mean, the computer that I'm on right now, it's a 2006 first generation Mac Pro running El Capitan. And this machine was supposed to top out at Lion. And I hacked it up to El Capitan, which is the highest you can go on the hardware. And I've got machines here that are, 15, 20, 25 years old. They're still in service. anybody else would have pitched ages
Yep.
ago.
I mean, I got machines out there that's still 30 years later, still running. I mean, from my perspective, if the customer come to me and they have a machine that is, for example, I still have abacus that do my math for me to do the calculation of the prices. I say, go use that. I don't care, it's 3,000 years old.
Yeah.
Makes no difference.
Yeah. I just take, it's a little bit like the Frankenstein movie where he brings the corpse back to life. I'll take a dead piece of hardware, and if I can bring it back to life, restore it to useful service, that's a win. I mean, I get a thrill out of that. I don't get as big a thrill nowadays as I used to,
Right.
because I've done it enough times, but there's just something about keeping something alive. I mean, hard technology alive that normally would have been pitched and become part of a landfill.
Yeah, the thing that you need to pay attention to, if I may bring up to the next level, is that are you interact with the internet? So then you need to protect from the outside worlds and all that stuff. So it's the way I tell my customers that unless you can protect whatever you are making, why are you bothering to work so hard? I mean, if your front door is open, why you buy 80-inch TV to the house so people will come and get it away? Because the security issue right now on the IT world is so bad. You may not believe it. I spend on average about 10 to 20 hours a week on security itself.
Yeah. Nobody would steal anything I own because it's all antique and they wouldn't be able to run it.
Yeah, again, if you put your credit card in there and you're buying something from it, or if you have your Swiss bank account number, secret password in there, or Bitcoin, whatever it is, then you need to protect it. Again, it's all about the more you have, the more you need to protect it. The less you have.
Yeah.
My favorite story about this is about a monk that have nothing, and the thief come into the house and couldn't find anything, and the thief walking out, the monk take off his shirt and give it to him.
Right, exactly. Yeah. If you're that hard up, you can have my shirt. Yeah. But one of my activities is I volunteer at the Fix-It shop at the community center. People bring in their household appliances that have stopped working, and more than half the time we can put them back into working order.
Yeah.
Some things are just worn out. There's just nothing you can do. But a lot of stuff you can put them back into useful service at nominal, negligible cost.
Right. So first thing is the safety. The next one is the energy usage. So the old computers like the light bulb, it's better for you to replace it with LED light bulb. Why? Because energy.
But when it's 10 degrees outside in Boston,
you're
using electricity to heat the house anyway. So, the waste heat in this time of year, the waste heat is not really wasted. This room is warmer than the rest of the house.
Right.
Because I have a lot of machines in this room, plus a space heater, and the rest of the house, I keep it down at 60 degrees. So.
Right. But the thing is, the winter only lasts you 3 months. So then what will happen to the other 9 months? So that's again.
So in the summertime, when it gets hot in the upstairs where I am, then I will use the machines on the first floor.
Okay.
And I won't sit. So I will sit here in this upstairs room the time of day when it's not hot. Right. But in the middle of a summer day, then I won't use this room because it's too hot and I don't want air conditioning.
Right. Which part of the country are you in? Which town?
I'm in the suburbs of Boston, Massachusetts.
Okay, Boston.
You probably heard of the famous towns of Lexington and Concord, where the Revolutionary War started. Bedford is nestled sort of in between Lexington and Concord, but we're not famous because the people in Bedford were loyalists to the king.
Okay.
Lexington and Concord were the rebels. So Bedford's not famous because we were the.
Right. And the other thing about it is we go down to the energy usage, the safety, and the next one level is about the functionality. So for example, if you want to use, whatever apps that they just developed that only works on Windows 10 or 11, then the old operating system would not work or something along that line. So again, it's about how sophisticated your needs are going to be.
Up until when Ventura came out, Monterey was the last working operating system, and you had to have a fairly modern machine to install it, like I think 2018 or new or something like that. So I have these machines that are 2012, 2013, and they stopped at Catalina. Well, you can put in a hack to install Monterey on machines that are 2011 and newer.
Yeah.
So I got Monterey running on my two newest old machines. And that meant that I could have AirPlay, which allows you
Right.
to have video and audio between machines, except
Right.
for my older machines, they could send out AirPlay, but they couldn't receive it. They were
Right.
one way only.
That's right.
What I spent yesterday doing was hacking a third-party version of AirPlay on my old machines, and I was compiling them out of a Python open source thing and compiling it. And just this morning, I managed to get this open source version of AirPlay running on my 2006 Mac running El Capitan and my 2009 Mac running High Sierra, both of which should have stopped getting upgrades,
Yeah.
Either back at Lion or back at Catalina
Right.
or back at El Capitan. So, it's like, what am I gonna do? It's 7 o'clock in the morning. There's nobody up. It's Sunday. It's Christmas Day, and I got nothing to do.
Right. Yeah.
I'm hacking in Python, and
That's
which I had
nice.
never hacked Python before until
Yeah.
yesterday. But so yeah, I retrofit these machines to use relatively late model operating systems.
Right.
Sometimes Linux, because Linux
Yeah.
can.
That's right.
So if I can't do it in Linux, I'll do it, or if I can't do it in Windows. This has got there's a
Right.
Windows 10 machine. There's a couple of old Mac OSs, and then I'll drop back to Linux if that's all that's left
Right,
to run
right.
on it.
Well, because you don't need to chunk through billions of records of data like OpenAI does that, all that stuff. So you don't have a need for that, right?
No, if this machine dies
Right.
tomorrow or this afternoon, it's no big deal.
Right.
I've been using this machine, I don't know, for a decade now.
Right.
And if and when this machine dies, I'll use the parts in it if there's anything left to use in the parts. The drives are probably still
Right.
good. And then I'll switch to one of the other machines that,
Right.
but here I'm actually on the old of all the Macs. Well, and actually, no, I got a late 1990s iMac over
Right.
there.
Right.
But that only runs,
Right.
it's only a G3 machine. So
That's it.
I got a G5 machine sitting next to me. That's one of my servers.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So I got machines that are, 20 years old and running 20-year-old operating systems that are
Again,
doing just
it's-
fine.
For satisfy what you need is so the need different for example, for me, I have to upgrade it because the speed. So instead of taking my programmer 6 hours to drive a program, now with the new machine, it only take him 1 hour. It's like, okay, how much is time per hour? They can do the math and all that.
Yeah, see, I'm not paying myself. I got all day anyway. I got to.
Love it, love it. Yeah. So again, this is all about need, and I call it compelling reason.
Yeah.
If you have a compelling reason, you will find the time to learn, or you have the time to adjust. So adjusting is actually almost like learning.
Yeah.
Accommodate whatever.
Believe it or not, I have never bought a computer in my life. Every computer that I have is salvaged from the discard pile. Every
Got it.
single one, and I have never gone to a store and bought a computer in my life.
Yeah.
Not even a used one.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, people keep giving me their old machines.
Right.
Here's an Android, just a Droid 2.
Wow.
My neighbor bought a new cell phone. And he wanted me to wipe this one for him. So I
Right.
wiped it. And I said, "You want it back?" He said, "No, you can keep it." So I have a perfectly working Android.
That's like iPhone. Sure,
It's a Motorola Droid 2, which is a pretty old model.
okay.
And I don't actually have a cell phone number.
Wow.
I
You
have a
using a-
landline, so I have a Google Voice number on this.
Oh, okay.
And so if I'm on Wi-Fi, I can make phone calls with Google Voice.
Yeah.
But I have
Beautiful.
to I have to have a Wi-Fi connection.
Right. Yeah. And Wi-Fi is everywhere nowadays. So
Yeah. So as long as this is on Wi-Fi, I can send and receive calls on it. But the thing is, I'm sitting here. I got a landline here too. So I can use Google Voice on the desktop, hands-free.
yeah. You can use a Google Voice to channel the phone to the landline as well. So when
Yes.
you're
If somebody calls me on the Google Voice and I don't answer it on Google
Yeah.
Voice, it will switch to the landline.
right, that's right. And vice versa. You can actually have your voice voicemail if you travel before you travel, or some phone company allow you to remotely transfer the call to the Google Voice as well. You know that?
Well, that I hadn't tried because I haven't actually traveled any place since I set this thing up. By
Right.
the way, when the battery on this, ballooned and died, you're not supposed to be able to take these apart because they're glued together.
Right.
I took this apart and put a new battery in it for like
Right.
$4.
Yeah. There's a website called iFixit. Yeah, they sell the tool for it as well as they tell you how to do it exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So you watch a bunch of YouTube videos of how to take it apart.
Yeah.
And I figured if I screw it up and destroy it, I've about $20 for the battery. But I did it. I took it apart and I put the new battery in. I put it back
Yeah.
together, and I didn't break it in the process, which sometimes I do destroy a machine, but not very often.
Okay. Yeah. The other possibility, of course, if you don't want to take it apart, the easiest solution would be buy a the power bank that have a little cable that plug into it. And then
Yeah, I don't know if because the battery in this one had died. How they kind of balloon when they die.
yeah.
They
It's-
get
yeah.
fat. So I think I would have had to take the old battery out anyway,
Yeah.
because it was getting to the point where when the battery fails, it does bad things.
Starting the chassis. Yeah. Okay. Got it.
So,
yeah.
and that's how I know it was dying, because the case was getting fat.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, the way that you transfer your home phone number is, I think it's a *73#, and then when you come home, you have to *72# or something like that to de-transfer it. So otherwise, it will still
Yeah.
running your phone.
Yeah, I think I did that by mistake one time, because I punched the wrong. I was trying to do my voicemail. I think I punched the wrong buttons, and that number that you said, I don't think it's documented.
No,
I
you can
had-
Google it. It's everywhere. It depends on the phone company. Some companies is different,
No,
but
I mean, I don't think Verizon. I don't think Verizon had documented *71,
yeah, it's just,
*73, and I talked to a service rep and they told me about it.
yeah.
They said, "Oh, you went into this other mode that's undocumented." But that was so long ago, I sort of forget the details. But I
Right.
think it was what you're just saying, that
Right,
funky mode.
right.
So
Yeah, I was talking about, before I took my break, I was talking about how do you discover your blind spot, or how do you know that you're stupid? That's, for me, that's always the challenge there, because I would watch out for that.
yeah, I mean, if you're lucky, somebody will eventually disclose it to you in a way that you can appreciate what they're saying. But yeah, I think we all have blind spots that we don't know about, and I know of people who have blind spots that I know about their blind spot and they don't. When I recorded that video to the Lexington Computer Technology Group, there was one guy who, when they announced I was going to give that talk, he was very eager about it, and I'm thinking, this is the guy who interrupts every speaker and talks forever and never lets the speaker finish their presentation. Turned out he didn't show up.
Wow.
He didn't show up, and that's why that session went so well. If he had shown up, he would have kept interrupting me,
Right.
and then would talk and talk and talk, and I wouldn't have gotten very far into my talk.
Right.
But the guy who normally hosts the session, he was out of town that week. So he had somebody else host the session. So it had a different Zoom number for just that 1 week. And I think that guy wasn't paying attention. He didn't show up, and he didn't find out that the Zoom ID was different that week. That's also why there weren't so many people as usual, because the people just they don't look at the weekly reminder. They just automatically go to the same number, and it didn't work that week.
Right. So this is what I call the universe conspired to help you to do whatever you need to get done.
So in a sense, I'm glad that, on the one hand, I was sad that not as many people were going to be able to connect because they didn't know the number had changed that week. But then I'm glad that this one guy didn't show up because I wouldn't have gotten through my talk if he had.
Yeah. Well, if he would have showed up, let's play with this. If he would have showed up, how would you present your presentation?
I would basically be sitting here waiting for him to finish. And it's not just me. He does this every session. He pipes up and he doesn't change the subject, but he talks about a sidebar issue. And he'll spend 10 minutes talking about a sidebar issue that really doesn't contribute to the presentation. And meanwhile, the speaker is losing time and never gets to the end of their material.
Right.
And he does this week after week after week.
Yeah, this is I find myself, I catch myself doing that as well sometimes. So about, I would say 20 years ago, I always like, whenever I have a talk or someone like that, I would say, what's the intention here? What's our goal here? Unless there's a goal, I wouldn't talk.
Yeah.
Because once you have a goal, then you have a common, what I call the destination that we can focus on. Like when you're sidetracked, is this relevant to that? Or if you can pull them back a lot easier, then you don't have a goal.
But more often than not, I will be in listening mode. And then after the whole thing is over, if there's any time left, I'll say a few things, but then I'll write something up. So more often than not, I will write up something afterwards and publish it. And then I will alert people that, you know, my comments are on the blog or someplace like that.
Nice.
And it's there forever. Well, not forever, but you know.
That's right. Yeah.
Definitely. Whereas speech is the wind, it's gone.
Yeah.
So
I learned from a teacher, say verbal communication create dependency.
yeah. I mean, at the end of any of these video sessions, you wonder, did anybody have a takeaway that they remember for more than an hour? And my feeling is no, because you realize that things keep coming around again after this long, like 2 months later, the same thing will come up, and there's no evidence that anybody recollected what was said about it 2 months before.
Yeah.
And you get enough of these, you get the feeling that it's gone with the wind.
Yeah. Someone actually asked me about how do I visually, or how do I process it? Is then the example you gave on your talk is about puzzle. And the way I say is like, I don't have a puzzle mess up, is my puzzle is always there, but there's a lot of missing pieces.
Right, exactly.
So when you give me a new piece of information, that puzzle fit into the hole that
Right.
I was looking for that piece. And I was looking, how do you connect the two continents together or something along that line?
Right.
Like, okay, that puzzle, as you build it, as if I complete that one section of puzzle, then I'm good for that. Then
Yeah.
like you say, I don't remember, but if I need to recall it, I should be able to recall it easily, because a complete puzzle, then you can see the big full picture.
Yeah. And that's the hard thing, is trying to figure out where are the gaps and the misconceptions in the other person's mental models. And it can take a long time to figure out where's the gaps and misconceptions. And then it takes a while to figure out how to present it so that it's received
That's right.
and integrated. And that's an art. It's an art and a science, and not easy.
Yeah. This way, you think of it like a math problem on the exam, right? If you know what to do, it's easy, the math problem.
Right.
If you don't know what to do, you struggle like hell, then you know there's a gap.
Right. Yeah. So I'm a big fan of puzzles, but not everybody's into puzzles. When I was at the Science Museum as a volunteer for 25 years, I set up a puzzle activity, and it was a very popular activity. These are all physical, manipulable puzzles. Well, that's not a puzzle, you know, it's something like that.
Yeah.
And so this is a child's puzzle, but I had, you know, a satchel full of puzzles from, you know, children's level up to, you know, graduate level difficulty. And I'd set them up on the counter every week, and people would come through, and they had a very long dwell time. People would sit at the counter doing puzzles for an hour or two. And because there was enough of them, there would always be a puzzle in the collection that was right at their frontier. Puzzle that they hadn't seen or solved before, that was still within the realm of them solving it in, say, 20 minutes.
Right.
And then they get this endorphin high when they solve it.
Yeah.
And then the next time they're in the museum, they come back to see, you know, what's the next puzzle, you know, in their lifelong puzzle solving journey.
Right.
And I did the puzzle activity for about 20 years.
Nice. Beautiful.
Yeah.
So puzzle give you multiple dimension, give you something you don't have. It's a big attractor. It give you a comparison. I can do this, and show off to your people that come with you and all that stuff. So that is an attraction for you. I didn't never see the colorful, the square one, say the children's puzzle. How does that work?
This one here.
Yeah, I never seen that before.
So let me see if I can get it in the camera. So
Yeah, I see.
So one of these openings is a hole. That one's a hole, right? Okay.
Okay.
And each of these colored balls, I don't know if you can see.
Yeah, I see the color ball, right?
The balls are colored, and the ring around a hole is colored. So first you scramble it. So you can pop and get it in the, so I can push these from a ball to a,
I see. Okay,
you
okay.
scramble them. And
So
then
the ring
next thing is-
color and the ball color need to match.
Right, so then, so this is a puzzle that a child can do in, I don't know, 5 minutes or so. So then you look around, and you say, all right, I need to get the purple one here. Where's the
Got it.
purple one? Oh, I can get it there. Oh, it's the wrong one. That's, so you futz with it, and eventually you get them all back in the right shape.
Got it.
And there's no numbers in this. You see, it's
Yeah.
all colors and.
Yeah.
So this is a puzzle for a very young child, and it's a fidgety thing, and I need more.
What do you call that? What do you call that puzzle?
It is called, what's the name of this puzzle? I actually have it on a web page.
Okay.
Let me see if I can find it for you. I don't always remember the trade names of these puzzles.
Trade name.
Well,
Register.
no, I mean, you do buy them in stores, and a lot of them aren't, a lot of them aren't available anymore because, I bought them 25 years ago. or
Got it.
whatever.
Got it. Got it. I was looking for things that stimulate the different dimension of the what I call the senses. Yeah, can improve their senses.
Let's see if I can, where is it?
I would call it color matching cube.
Oh, yeah, here it is. I am going to do a screen share. Let's see,
Right.
where's the screen share? Share screen. And I gotta find it's this one here. Share. Now, unordered, this is, I did an activity on sorting. In computers, you do sorting. So this is called an unordered sort. Where's my mouse? Unordered sort, this is called the Orbo puzzle toy.
Mm.
So not every sort puts things into a sequential order, and so this was an example of a sorting activity that was very simple, but the name of the puzzle is Orbo.
Oboe.
Yeah. Trademarks. So if I see if they still have a website.
It's okay.
Is that
Hey,
gonna
man.
come up?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Are you seeing this page?
Yeah, I'm seeing it. Beautiful.
Yeah. So I clicked on it and it comes up Orbo from Plasmart Inc. See, you can see how old it is. It's 12
Wow.
years old or something.
Yeah.
But so it was part of a collection of sorting activities that I brought this in.
Yeah.
So
This may be a good choice to find out if the kids are colorblind.
yeah. So let's see. I want to end the sharing. Where do I end it? Over here?
Go back to the screen share again.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just
that's
had to
it.
find
Thank
the
you.
right- I got 2 monitors and multiple
Yeah,
windows.
beautiful. I noticed that. Otherwise, you won't be able to switch from one computer to the next computer.
But yeah, we had a bunch of sorting activities because this was the part of the museum that was introducing computer ideas to the general public. And
Got it.
so one of the activities was because one of the very first functions of computers was sorting.
Mm.
And we wanted to have a little module on sorting activities. So that was why
I saw them all, Sony, Fujitsu, Panasonic, you name it. I one time even have customer that have to buy a Fujitsu computer from Japan because they have all sales officers that they need Fujitsu computer only or something like that. Like I have to import them from Japan. It's a nightmare. That's how I discover the Japanese company doing business in US have so many legal regulations, requirements that they tie your head, to your feet, to your leg, your toe, and expect you to run.
So anyway, I'm putting this back in the right order now to get it in the camera.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I think my 3-year-old grandson would love this one.
Yeah. 3-year-old, yeah, 3-year-old can do this one. So.
Yeah.
So I think, let me just see if I've got it back.
Yeah,
So
I
the
got it.
black, the light blue, the
Yeah.
light purple. So now it's back and the hole doesn't have a color. It's
Yeah,
just-
yeah. The whole without color is supposed to be blank. Right?
And everything else is now back where it belongs.
Matches,
So-
yeah.
So this is a very nice little unordered sort. It's
Mm.
not, it's not a quantitative sort. It's just a color matching sort.
Right.
And a lovely little puzzle. I'm guessing you can still buy them because they still
Yeah,
have
I'm
a
sure.
website.
Otherwise, you buy them from eBay for somebody that don't
Yeah.
need them anymore.
Yeah, I used to buy them from a company called Bits and Pieces, but I think they stopped selling they still sell jigsaw puzzles, but I think they stopped selling these little physical manipulables.
Mm,
But there's always a company that sells
Yeah.
puzzles of different
Yeah.
genres. So
Usually there's a more advanced version unless they patented it's still in fact or something like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good version.
well, yeah, I mean, the Tower of Hanoi was a very popular one, and that's a kind of a sorting puzzle that's classical for computers. The Tower. I don't know if you ever done the Tower of Hanoi. Do you know it? The thing about the Tower of Hanoi is that
I mean, Power Hanoi, I know what it is, but I've not seen a puzzle that designed based on that concept.
oh well, I mean, the Tower of Hanoi is a puzzle. So, and there's a very clever way of coaching somebody to discover how to solve it without giving it away. And once I worked that out, because you're really teaching recursion. To solve the Tower of Hanoi, it's really a problem in recursion.
Yeah, it's recursion,
And recursion
yeah.
is a very subtle idea that's important in computer science and mathematics, but the average
Right.
person, if you say
Right.
recursion, it's just a word that has no
Right.
sharp meaning for the average person. But the Tower of Hanoi is a kindergarten introduction to recursion. And you can start with the Tower of Hanoi with just 3 discs.
Yeah.
See, the 1 disc is trivial, the 2 disc is trivial, the 3 disc is slightly not trivial. Then once you add 4, 5, 6 discs, it starts to get harder. But no matter how many discs you add, if you already know how to solve the previous version with 1 less disc, you move that to the idle post, then you move the bottom one to where you want it, and then you have to move the smaller one to it.
Right.
So if you can solve the 1 disc one, which is trivial, then you can solve the 2 disc one.
Right.
Once you know how to solve the 2 disc one, you can solve the 3 disc one.
Right.
And so how do you exercise this recursive thing in a systematic way? And you can discover that on your own with a little coaching, and then you can learn to execute it reliably.
Right.
And it's a great insight, because recursion is not an easy thing to get your brain around.
Right. Right. I think of that as a priority sorting, like I got 2 things to do. Which one is more important? Which one need to go first before the other one messed it up or whatever?
Yeah, and you really want to think of that way around. If I want to get the bottom one over there, where do all the others have to be parked in the meantime?
Right.
In the idle. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well, think about that. If you want the other ones parked there, which is the bottom one that you want there first?
That's right.
Okay. Where are you going to park the other ones in the meantime?
That's right.
So you keep alternating. So you solve it recursively,
Yeah.
and then so as you work your way up, you say, okay, then where are you going to park the top one in the meantime?
Right.
So you can see how it flows recursively, and asking those questions at the right time in the right order is Socratic method. So you actually use the Socratic method to coach somebody to figure out which one to put where first,
Right.
so that you can systematically
Yeah.
move the smaller set to get to the bottom one that needs to go next.
Right. So only precision, sequencing. There's only like 2 or 3 variables on the Socratic.
Yeah. And you can use that as an abstract analogy for a lot of other problems.
Oh yeah. As I say, I call that, if you don't know how to sequence that, you cannot prioritize the thing that need to be prioritized doing first or something along that line, like driving, right?
Yeah.
It's like which way you want to go first and to be safe path to get out of the jam.
It's how you work out the sequence so that everything so you get the sequence of the individual steps right.
That's right. It's
And-
allowing your logical mind to take over instead of letting your emotions like, let me do it this way, and like by brute force.
Yeah.
A
You
lot
can
of people.
imagine you got a chain link fence, and there's a dog on the other side of the fence, and there's a bone on this side of the fence. And the
Right.
dog wants to go towards the bone, but the fence is in the way. But there's a
Right.
gap way over there, 50 yards away, the fence ends. The dog has to go away from the goal, a long distance to get around the fence and to come
Got
back.
it. Love
And
it.
the longer that you got to go around around the horn, the harder it is to not just want to push through the fence.
Right.
That's the kind of discipline of like going away from the goal to get to a clear path
Love it.
Get you past the current obstacle.
Nice. Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you have to think logically. This is why I keep reminding my students, like you have to think logically in order to solve that. If you let your emotion take over,
Right.
you have a bleeding head.
Right. So you're pushing against the chain link fence and it's stronger than you.
Yeah.
So if you give it with the dog and the chain link fence and the bone, then that gives you the concrete example that even a child can see.
Right.
You say, well, see, there's a gap in the fence way over there.
So how do you do this mathematically? How would you?
What I did is, I'll show you. If I can find the right one here. Let's see, where is it? Now, here it is.
By the way, I love math and physics when I grew up, so it's one of my favorite
So,
subject of all.
Let's see, go back to share screen again. Which one is it? Problem is that I can't really tell which of the windows it is. Here, let's see.
You can close everything else except that one. Then it's a lot easier to choose.
I think
Remove the
I think
thing.
I have it as desktop one. So
Got
let
it.
me select that one. Desktop one.
Let me share the whole screen. That's how you don't have anything else going on. Okay.
Does it say Socratic method template?
Yeah,
up top?
got it. I read
So-
that. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a 36 question sequence,
Right.
and the way it works is that if you go to ask questions, there's basically 6 kinds of questions: who, what, where, when, why, and how.
Right.
So you start at the most concrete level,
Right.
the simplest kindergarten concrete example, and you ask and get the answers to all 4 questions: who, what, where, when, why, and how at that level. Now that you've explored the most concrete level, now you elevate to the next meta level above that, the
Right.
next slightly more general case.
Hmm.
And you again ask 6 questions.
So from general to specific.
Right. From general to more abstract and patterns and models. So
Got it.
there are 6 levels of abstraction, from the most concrete to the most abstract, and
Right.
6 questions at every level. That's
Got it.
36 questions.
Right.
And so I gave examples of you start with some general vague question, and you walk your way from the most concrete beginning up through 6 levels, and then every group of 6 you're ascending until you get to the top of the abstract hierarchy, and you can do this for lots of things. So there's this pattern, and what's cool about it, if I go back, let me see if I can go back here. This is an old legend. The way you say 36 in Hebrew is the letter Lamed L, which is 30, and the letter Vav V, which is 6, so 36. So there's this legend of the Lamed Vav, the legend of the 36, and it kind of goes with that Socratic pattern.
6 by 6. Yeah.
Yeah,
6
because-
levels, 6, 2 levels.
Yeah, because the idea is that you to have a colloquium that can go from the most concrete case all the way up the hierarchy to the most abstract, philosophical, theological, top level thinking, you have to have one person whose job it is to ask their question at their level.
Hmm.
And the Legend of Law Vav says you have to have 36 conscientious scholars.
Hmm.
And each one is responsible for asking one of those 36 questions, one of the 6 at their level. And if anyone is missing, this is from the legend, if anyone is missing, the conversation will abruptly come to a grinding halt because he doesn't rise to ask his question. He's not there.
Yep.
So if even one of the 36 of the conscientious scholars is missing, then the whole thing grinds to a halt.
Hmm.
And so this comes from the Kabbalah. You have the 36 conscientious scholars, ethical, attentive, studious, just, and here you are,
Hmm.
6 at every level, and 6 levels, and you work your way up from kindergarten to graduate school, theology, and that exactly fits into the Socratic method because there's 6 questions at every level.
Right.
So you can do it through mystical Kabbalah, you can do it through Socratic method, you can, it's just, it's
Right.
secular, it's academic secular. So let's see, I want to
Thanks. Yeah.
back out of that a second there. Let's see, go back.
Think of it like a 6 spoke, what they call spoke for the wheels and the cycle.
So
And
you're
it's like
going
what
around,
you
you're at, you go around the 6
Cycle.
questions at every level, and then you hop up to the next higher level
Right.
until you get all the way up to the top of the theological hierarchy, where you're at the
Yeah.
most philosophical, metaphysics, it's
Right, right.
it's the most fundamental questions
Right.
of, physics and consciousness and whatever you want to,
Right.
most abstract level. Most people, work their way up a few levels. When Maria Montessori worked out her Montessori method,
Right.
she basically said, you go from the most concrete at a certain age range, and it takes about 20, 25 years to work your way up through the 6 levels. And in your mid-20s, you can get to the 6th level of abstraction.
Wow.
So basically grad school. So she had the same thing, she had these 6 levels of ascending abstraction in the Montessori method.
So now that you introduce a powerful tool, I was challenged maybe next meeting, we can talk about consciousness using these 36 questions.
Yeah. So in that template, I gave, I think, 4 or 5 examples of
Right.
the template, discrete examples. And so once you see the pattern, you can just sort of enter into the Socratic template at the level. It's like, where are people sort of getting stuck?
Right.
Where is the thing kind of ground to a halt? And you can figure out what question to ask that is going to be the next unasked and unanswered question. What is it all solid at the lower level, and where are you running out of solid knowledge? And then you work your way to, that's the frontier. That's how you
Right.
find the frontier.
Right. You think of it like almost like a brick Masonic work, cylinder and all the way up to
Right.
you know,
So what's the current frontier of the brick wall you're building?
right,
And what's the next brick at the frontier?
right,
And then once you've got all 6 bricks at the current frontier
Right.
level, then you can address the next higher level of abstraction.
yeah,
Plato's ideals or patterns or models or whatever you want to think about it as the next level of abstraction.
right. All right, we almost get down to the hour.
Yeah, so Sam is staring at something, but I can see that he is staring, but I don't know what he's staring at.
I don't know how my camera got to such an extreme zoom situation, and I'm not clear that I can fix it.
It doesn't tilt. See, mine tilts. I've got this tiltable thing at the top of this.
Mine does too. I just got into an interesting zoom situation, and I didn't do anything. This thing is on some kind of automatic.
You're on a NUC, right?
But more until it's a Logitech camera that's trying to do
Oh,
something.
yeah, the new cameras have an electronic zoom function. And there is some application that lets you control the zoom. I mean, sometimes you can, sometimes the mouse wheel, but that's usually only on your display, not what the camera is generating.
No, I'm familiar with those UI hacks, so I'm still experimenting.
Yeah, you probably have a Logitech control application that's maybe,
But this isn't a Linux
activated.
machine, so it's unlikely that Logitech software installed itself here. Anyway, I was just listening to you two get to know each other.
Thank you.
And
Appreciate
I'll
it.
definitely be more participatory next Sunday.
Right.
And hopefully this is something that you may find interesting to return to, Sam, hopefully.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, thank you for the intro and thank you for the session. And I'm
There's
learning a
lots
lot.
of-
Thank you so much for structural thinking and abstract and, help me to
Yeah, there's lots of material. Almost everything that I spend any time thinking on, I end up putting something up on the internet. So your challenge is to come up with an interesting question that I never thought about before, never wrote about before. And then once I think about it and come up with something, then it'll be the next thing I post on the internet.
So I
Yeah.
co-founded Conscious Leadership Guild 3.5 years ago, something along that line. So I was interested in how do I take this Socratic question, 36 question, and answer that. I mean, I was looking for whatever material you have on consciousness, because for me, it's like, unless you can calibrate and validate it, it doesn't exist. Like consciousness is one of those things that I know you're conscious, but I cannot tell. Like the music that love each other, the two musical notes that love each other. I don't know. I know it's a nice, sounds good, but I cannot tell. It's like, you know, I don't.
I really tie it into model-based reasoning, because to be conscious of something is to be aware of it, and to be aware of it, you can be aware of something that you don't understand. It's there, and it's a mystery. Got about question marks on it, and then what you want to do is you want to replace the question marks with knowledge of the structure of the system. So consciousness is really model building, awareness of something that's is incompletely understood, got some mystery to it, and then resolving the mystery so you have a realistic model of it that captures its appearance, its behavior, its structure. And then once you say, okay, there's a tree out there, and I now know enough about trees and, you know, living systems that it's not a mystery anymore. But then after that, well, then what about plants in general? Not just the tree, what about the grass, and the bushes, and what about the individual cells that make up it? So the thing is that as you become familiar with something that's present, you know, at the detail, at the gross level, and like, so, okay, so a cell is made up of water and carbohydrates and stuff like that. Well, what's water made out of? What's a carbohydrate made out of? Oh, what's a carbon atom made out of? You know, so you keep, you know, you're zooming in and zooming out to the next level of detail. You get to quarks, and you get to how stars make atoms and protons and all that kind of stuff. And your consciousness expands because your mental models or your scientific models or your mathematical models are getting more comprehensive and more detailed.
So that's the meaning of consciousness. The question is, how do you know when someone is conscious? I guess on the subject, you have to be more
Because
specific.
if you ask them a question and they don't respond, then they're not paying attention. So attention is one of the pieces of evidence of consciousness, and they attempt to answer the question and maybe stumble around. Well, at least, you know, they're making an effort. And if they're very clear thinking about it, very logical, then they have a, you know, keen awareness, keen consciousness. Sam's got his hand up.
Yeah.
So I'm actually more interested in how these questions elicit joint thinking, co-thinking,
Yes,
rather than answering.
right.
And I think that's an interesting pattern for us to lean into. I think
Because you want to say, what's the next question that I don't know the
very,
answer
very,
to?
very.
That's why I'm challenging you
That
to
point.
open up a big topic that we have compelling reason to get together. How's
Right.
that?
Right.
Because I think, you know, Barry, one of the things that you represent for me and Sam is, you know, a fascinating history of thought and thinking. Likewise, I find that Sam Chan has a fascinating history of insights and work, etc. So I think where we could actually take these good ideas, meld them together, create better, quote unquote, new ideas,
Yeah.
is the interesting excitement
Yeah.
and opportunity I find, rather than just learning about each other from our histories.
Yeah,
It's
make a
actually
synthetic model.
in the present.
Yeah, integrate a synthetic model where I contribute what I'm strong in, Sam contributes what he's strong in. Sam is a good integrator. Sam Han, you can take things and integrate them into a picture that assembles multiple sources, interlaces and fits them together.
So by the way GCC was founded was on principle of first learning about each other, and then second, learning how to take these good ideas from each of us and co-creating something. That
Yeah.
second part we have yet to understand.
Yeah.
And we have yet to experiment with.
Right.
So much of what our history is just finding about each other's histories, but we haven't yet really leveled up to the point where we're actually co-creating better thoughts together. And
Yeah.
that's what I find exciting.
And
Yeah,
I
so-
want to co-create better educational mechanisms, better educational methods.
Let's start by
Yeah.
better conversations and better thinking, okay?
Yeah.
Before we go to actual systems, in my opinion.
So
How do you figure out where somebody's frontier of learning is? How do you intervene in a constructive way that's pleasurable, but also the learning takes place. And at the end of the day, people will say, can we meet again tomorrow?
So Barry, what I would love to see is a leaning in to co-thinking and co-wondering,
Yeah.
and less about immediate answers.
Yeah, well, once you've answered the immediate questions, then then the next thing is, okay, now that you've answered the question that's been killing me for the last 30 years, that's been distracting me for the last 20 years. Now let's look for what do we want to do next?
Right.
And that
What
was
I
the
want to do
bottom
next
line
is
of-
convene next Sunday.
Yeah, so what do we want to do next Sunday, right? Yeah, where's the next frontier?
We each can come with those ideas because we each can, think of what we can take away from today.
And question number 36 in that template is, do you know what you want to do next? Where do you want to go next? After you've
That's a
sort of-
whole array of things.
Right. And the answer is, I don't really know where I should go next. I'm kind of at a point where I don't know what the next thing is. This was Steve Jobs. He created a company called Next. After he was sort of done with the first round of Apple, he goes, what's next? And that was the name of his next project, Next.
Yeah. I'm thinking about from the puzzle perspective. We are just looking at all the small pieces and together and discover as many pieces as we can before we decide how do we pile up those and stick everything together right now.
What can we make out of the random pieces that don't belong to an integrated system yet?
And the more we know each other, the more we can say, okay, you have this strength, you have that strength. And let's just say, allow me to have some warm-up time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have the advantage that everything that I've spent any time thinking about, you can find a page or two or more on the internet. where
Right,
I've written it up very succinctly.
right.
And that means that I don't have to be here if you wanted to.
No,
dive
I'm
into
looking
something.
from a perspective of if you have any question about concrete, that you think I have, shoot me a question that I can talk about. We can jump on the call and you don't have to wait the next Sunday.
Well,
Because
for
I don't know how many
example-
Sunday do we have, question.
I mean, you have 20 employees and your wife, right? So one of the questions on my mind is, after you've digested some material of mine that you find interesting and fresh, what would happen if you picked one or two or three people in your circle and shared it with them? How would that go? Are
did
there
already.
people in your circle that seem right to be receptive? And number two, if you did present them to them, would it work? Would it be a gain for them and you? And that's the big question on my mind. Is this stuff gonna have a life of its own? I'll be 80 years old in a couple of years.
Right. That's why I say, how many more Sunday do we have? That's why I say, whenever you have a question that you want to post, just
Yeah.
message me and we can jump on the call right away and whatever works for you.
What
I'm here
would
to
happen
support
if you,
whatever needs to be supported. Yeah.
what would happen if you attempted to share this with your compatriots?
I did. I shared with about 3 people so far, and
Okay.
interesting thing. We need more time to present what it is, but I'm more thinking about scaling. I said, how could I take your material and then post it out on so I can, for example, introduce it to my conscious leadership guild. We have about 100 members that in the professor. So basically they have 1/3 is executive and consultant and and then academia, right? So for example, Michael Ray from Stanford is now the street from me is a Stanford professor and all that stuff. So I love to be able to connect you with a group of people that will be even have much more heavier conversation, like the Lexington group, like smart people, and
Yeah.
there could be. I see a lot of value because for me it's a stepping. The way I tell people is like, how do you go from first floor to second floor? You can practice jumping up and down, or you can use the stairs. And you are
Right.
bringing up the stairs for me. That's why I say, here, learn how to
Yeah.
use the stairs.
Yeah. So that will be of interest to me is what's the next audience?
Right.
The next
Yeah.
audience that you know them, I don't know them yet.
Right,
What's the
right,
next
right.
audience that would benefit from exposure to this, and how would they react to exposure to it? I
Right.
have no idea who my next audience is.
I have 3 groups that I can tell you right now, if I can take the next 5 minutes, introduce the 3 groups I'm heavily involved with. The first group is a much larger group, millions of members, United Religious Initiative, URI.org.
Okay.
I joined about 20 years ago. The mission is to end inter-religious violence.
And I've written about that too. quite a
Yeah,
bit.
So that's interfaith group that's really big around the world. So that's the first group. The second one is a conscious leadership guild, as I say, has about 100 members, and basically you have to be invited and you'll be endorsed by 2%, otherwise you won't get joined in. It's that group of people. The last group I joined is Service Space. I'm not sure you heard of them. Service Space, the one that paying forward service. You can Google them. Service Space. So this is a non-profit organization that everything done by volunteerism. It's all doing good around the world, and very high power. They have helped over 8,000 nonprofit to create their own website for free. So that kind of group. It depends on how. I'm trying to think right now. The best group is the second group, the Conscious Leadership Guild, that you can engage in. That I'm trying to make the stairs, perhaps make the stairs into elevator, so I say, or escalator.
Escalator,
Yeah.
So here, besides that Lexington Computer and Technology Group, there's another group in Lexington that I attend. It's sponsored by Grace Chapel, which is a non-denominational Christian church over in Lexington, and they have a group called the Science and Theology Study Group. They're all scientists or engineers or technicians, but they're also Christians. And every month they have a session where they talk about the interface between science and theology. And I presented there and have stuff written up on that too. And then volunteer work. Yeah, I've been doing volunteer work for 30 years. So every week. So yeah, right. I can slot in any of those.
Right. The way I'm thinking about it is like, how do I create a compelling reason? Because for them to give up their time to come to our conversation, you have to have something compelling enough.
Pick an emissary from each of your three groups. Pick one or two or three emissaries from each of your three groups and start with them.
Right.
The person who you think would be the best intermediary.
Right.
And introduce them, and then they can meet us here or on Zoom or whatever. And then if they say, yeah, this looks like it's of interest to the rest of the group, the emissary can act as the go-between.
Right. So I'm saying basically facilitating, how do they help them to make them learn better what they need to learn and install their own blind spot and all that stuff. So that's what I'm interested in, to make their job easier, all that stuff.
So pick a few people, tease them with this material. If they say, oh, I want to do more, then either they can dive into it off the web, or we can do a live session, either way, whatever.
Looking forward to it.
And that will work. Yeah. And we need to do that while I still have life and breath and don't get too old and senile. And
I really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Are we done, Sam?
For now, I would think this is a good time to take a respite and look forward to next week. Okay?
It's 2 hours and 15 minutes, so we can probably.
Thank you.
I didn't do anything. The video fixed itself. I don't understand what's going on. Okay.
Well,
Anyway, Sam, Barry.
Yeah. Let me save the chat before you end it. Let's see. Where is it? Come on, chat, open up. There you go. All right, I saved the chat. You can end it now.
Thank you.